Hey friends, we appreciate you, the listener, and I hope you appreciate our sponsors because they make Hansel Minutes possible. Today's first sponsor is Melissa. Are you looking to build real-time contact data validation and enrichment into your applications? Try Melissa's developer portal. You'll gain easy access to flexible APIs for global address verification, phone, IP address, email, and property and business data. Sample code and get-post methods plus technical documentation are all included. Quick online payment makes rapid application development easy. Please visit melissa.com/developer or call 1-800-MELISSA. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today, I'm talking with Ire Aderinokun. She's calling in from Lagos, Nigeria. How are you?
Hi, Scott. I'm really great.
So you are a front-end developer. You're a UX UI designer. You work for IO out of Lagos, but you also have degrees in experimental psychology and law. Did you become a lawyer and then become a developer, or how did that happen?
Yeah, this is something people always ask me. I actually never practiced either psychology or law. I studied psychology as my undergrad, then I wasn't ready for the real world. So I decided, okay, let me do another degree. And I decided to do law because I found it interesting. And while I was doing law, it was kind of when I discovered that programming and like front-end development was an actual real job that people do. So I was like, wow, this is something I kind of have to pursue because I had been doing it kind of as a hobby since I was a teenager. So I just decided once I graduate, I'm going to try and go for it. So I never actually practiced, but I like to call myself a psychologist/lawyer/developer.
That's pretty amazing. And I would think, though, that being a UX and UI focused developer, that understanding psychology would be a helpful thing.
Yeah. When people ask, I usually say, oh, I don't think it actually helped me at all. But the more I've thought about it, I think it actually does kind of help, especially just being able to empathize a bit more with the user and just kind of the whole concept of user research and just trying to kind of understand the user's perspective a bit more. I think it's helped because I know how to do studies with like other human beings. I've done that kind of thing before. So I think that aspect has helped me.
Yeah, the soft skills and the hard skills.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is this concept that I'm seeing a lot of online. I'm hearing about the next billion users, and I want to understand what exactly that means.
Yeah, so the next billion users is a term I heard, I think it was at Google I.O. last year for the first time. So it was essentially, as far as I know, coined by Google. And if you think of a company like Google, for example, like over the last, 20 years, however long the internet has been a real thing, the users of any major product like Google or whatever products were available were mainly people in like Western countries and people who were rich enough to have access to like a computer and access to the internet. So if you think about that kind of user base, as compared to now, it's completely different because it was a very, very narrow user base. But like I said, if you compare that to now, it's almost a completely different story. You have so many more people coming online from so many different countries, so many different just walks of life, essentially. So I think the whole next billion users concept is kind of acknowledging this shift in user base and acknowledging that there's a whole new set of people who are just coming online or just really getting comfortable online that are going to be using these products that were previously pretty much only built for that previous narrow user base. So it's just about changing your mindsets and thinking about who your users actually are, because chances are if you built a product 5-10 years ago, you're building it for a completely different user base than exists today.
Yeah, the first billion users, I guess there's about 3 billion people. that like have smartphones, but the first billion people probably were like me. They got online 20 plus years ago. We got on via AOL, America Online, or dial up. And the next billion will probably be not in Portland or New York or in London, but in South America or in Southeast Asia or in Africa, and they'll be on a smartphone, won't they?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. The whole shift in mobile versus desktop as well. Like even 5 years ago, it was pretty much when you're building a site or building anything, it's mainly for people sitting down at a desk. But now you have to build for people who are on the go or people who are just managing their entire lives through like a 4-inch screen or however big their smartphone is. So it's like a huge shift really in the way that we have to think about how we're building our products.
So the blog post about the next billion users that on Google says that these billion users are already starting to change the internet. And you point out this mobile only mindset. Like they don't have computers at their home. They don't have a laptop of any kind.
I don't know if I can say, oh, they don't have a computer, but I can speak of my experience of seeing a lot of people here in Nigeria. A lot of people I personally see, their main device is their mobile device. Or maybe they have a tablet, but their main device is their mobile device. And one of the main reasons for that is because we struggle a lot, especially in Nigeria, because we have a lot of government issues. We struggle a lot with power. So having something like a laptop that is, I mean, compared to a mobile phone or a tablet is much more dependent on like a power source, is a lot more unreliable than just having a mobile phone that you can like carry around with you and it lasts for longer than like a laptop or like a desktop would. Like you can't even use a desktop because it would be too reliant on power. So I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people tend to focus on mobile devices. But obviously another reason is that it's a lot cheaper. And for the things that the average person wants to do, someone that's not like a developer like myself that is trying to do something that's really, really heavy on processing and all of that. For the average person that just wants emails and Facebook and WhatsApp, there's no need to have a whole computer. You can just do all of that from your phone. So that's why I think that for a lot of people, their first device and maybe their only device is going to be a mobile device. So even if they do have a laptop, it probably wouldn't be their primary device unless they are like a working professional that needs that as their primary device.
Interesting. That's a really interesting way to put it. It's not that they don't necessarily have a laptop or have access to a computer. It's not their primary device. And it's funny that you say that because even though I'm sitting here and we're both chatting to each other on computers, I probably spend as much time, if not more, on my phone. So one could argue that my iPhone is my primary device.
Yeah, that's actually
already
a really good point. I didn't think of it that way because I mean, if you ask me to do 24 hours without my phone or 24 hours without my laptop, I would probably say I need my phone. So I think for a lot of people, it is their phone. Their phone is the primary device, even if like you or me, they primarily work on their laptop. So it's actually you're right. It's not that like specific to the next billion users that their mobile device is the primary device. And if you think about it, you're doing more and more things on your phone. Like previously, I mean, you wouldn't have even imagined doing things like email on your phone because it might have been too difficult to type in or something like that. But now, I mean, I think we all do things, more and more important things on these like smaller mobile devices.
Which is interesting because I still don't see at least on the websites that I go to, a mobile first mindset. We've been hearing mobile first now for quite a few years. But, you know, if I go visit like my favorite news site for tech, which is The Verge, it's like 7 or 8 megabytes just for the homepage. And most of it's JavaScript and fat PNGs.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I'm definitely still a bit like guilty of this myself. It's almost as if us as the developers, the people making all of this online content, it's like almost like we're in denial about about the fact that most people are now kind of shifting to mobile, and we just kind of want to preserve this desktop feel. And like I said, I'm definitely a bit guilty of this myself. I mean, when I'm trying to design something, I love designing desktop first, even though I know that mobile is probably going to be the most important in a lot of situations. But I think people are becoming more and more aware, and the whole mobile first thing is definitely it has really taken off, and more people are, even though they might not be putting as much weight on mobile as it deserves, they're definitely putting a lot more than they used to.
It seems like it is an exercise in empathy. Like, I would assume, given that I'm here on the west coast of the U.S. and I have a nice big computer and a fast bandwidth, that you, Ire, in Nigeria, would be seeing people living a mobile first lifestyle, so that you would naturally design that way. But you also have fast internet and a nice big computer and a nice big monitor, so you can catch yourself being desktop first and being high bandwidth first, even though you are closer to the next billion users.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's actually more because obviously as a developer, most of my world is still online. Like when I'm talking about my colleagues or people I interact with in my working environments, they're mostly people all around the world. So it can be easy to think in their mindsets rather than think in the mindset of, oh, I'm building a product specifically for people in this country. And I dealt a lot with this in my previous job where I worked with a media company here based in Nigeria. And I think the biggest shock for me when I was working there was when I realized that like quite a significant percentage of people were using Opera Mini browser. So that really like freaked me out because if like for people that don't know, Opera Mini is a very stripped back browser. So there are so many things like JavaScript or CSS features that just basically don't work. So, I mean, what I would suggest to everyone is to kind of just download Opera Mini on their phone and just open up whatever site they're currently working on in that browser. And I guarantee you'll like gasp because I definitely did. I was like, whoa. And that was kind of a shock for me. And it kind of just shocked me back into reality and realizing, oh, I can't just be building for people who have the phone that I have. I need to think more about the actual users. And that's kind of where the whole empathy thing plays into.
Yeah, Opera Mini it's funny that you bring that up because that's something that I have not thought about in many, many years. But I think it's worth both of us pointing out that the next billion users, it's not necessarily a euphemism for, oh, there'll be a billion Africans or a billion Asians or a billion South Americans suddenly online and the Western people should start thinking about it. There are a billion new users coming on that are from all over the world. My brother, as an example, lives in rural Oregon. He just recently got internet there because he can't get fiber. There's no cable there. So he actually has a cell phone connection that's sitting on top of his roof on his barn. And then that puts Wi-Fi out. But he only has 3 gigabytes a month bandwidth.
Oh, wow.
So I asked him what browser he was using, and he was using Opera Mini because apparently they compress images and pages a second time. And he found that it saved him on bandwidth. So here's someone 35 miles south of me who is living what most connected Americans would think is a primitive lifestyle. But in fact, there's a lot of people like that in your country, whoever you are listening to this podcast, that are not as connected as you are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because whenever people say next billion users, like you said, people tend to think of, oh, just Africans or something coming online that have never seen anything. So they tend to, I mean, I know that it can be easy to have that mindset that these are people who live in very, very rural areas or people who like, I don't know, live in huts or something, which is typically what people tend to think when they think of like the average poor African person. But the whole next billion users thing isn't just about that. I mean, that is obviously one aspect of it. People who couldn't come online before because of like financial issues or things like that. But there are many different other people that this whole next billion users concept covers. So you have things from, like you said, people who live in Western or first world or however you want to call it countries who just couldn't come online for, I don't know, logistical reasons, like your brother, for example. And you could also have people who couldn't come online because of accessibility reasons, for example. So there are a lot of things, a lot of assistive technology, which is coming up now. So screen readers are getting so much better, and that's enabling people who couldn't come online because maybe they have visual impairment or any other form of difficulties like that. And that isn't what you might think when you think of next billion users, but that is like a category of people who are just being able to come online now because technology has gotten so much better. So when I think of next billion users, I try not to restrict it to just the people that are like just around me that I might be immediately concerned about. But it's more about just taking a global view of who your users can be and no longer just thinking that it could be the small subset of people. You have to just open your mind more and think about all the different people that exist in the world, because pretty much all of those people are going to be able to come online very soon.
Exactly. And if we assume that everyone, if we not assume, but if we agree that everyone deserves to be online, then if there's small things that we can do to make their lives easier, then we should do those things. For example, I met a number of blind software developers at Microsoft, and for the last several years, I always include alt tags on my images on my blog, and even Twitter now lets you put an alternative tag on images when you post them, because I saw someone tweet that as a blind person, they just scroll past those things. Like if I can't see your image and you didn't bother to describe it, I'm just going to ignore your content entirely, and it doesn't take 10 seconds for me to fix it.
Yeah, that's why, like we both said, the empathy thing is an important aspect of it. It's just about putting yourself in the position of someone who isn't having the exact same experience that you are. And I've had similar experiences like you as well, like realizing, oh, you can now put alt text in your Twitter images. So that's something that I've tried to do now as well. And I always include alt text in when I'm writing like my blog articles.
Yeah, that's a small thing. So I've heard accessibility is important. What about local languages? How important is internationalization when we're thinking about the next billion? Hey folks, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors and remind you that when you support them, you're supporting Hansel Minutes because they make this show possible. Innovative developers help improve the lives of millions of small businesses and accountants that use QuickBooks worldwide. Your app could make the difference that helps them work smarter and put more money in their pocket. Enter Intuit Developer. From tech tools to growing your customer base to helping you get funding, Intuit Developer helps your app go from concept to company. Find out more at intuit.me/code. That's intuit.me/code.
Internationalization is also a really important thing when I'm thinking about like building on the global scale, because as someone from a primarily English speaking place, it can be very easy to just think that the whole world speaks English. And especially when like the US is an English speaking place and the US tends to dominate a lot of things online as well. But particularly through working at IO, I've kind of had my eyes opened a bit more to that, because a lot of the websites that we do are all translated, and it's just made me think and made me much more aware of things that I typically may not have thought of, like something as simple as making sure that the site can work in the languages left to right and right to left. Those are things that, I mean, I probably haven't really tested ever before, but now I'm getting more aware of it. And it doesn't even have to be as big or as much work as making your site work both directions. Something as simple as just in the document title, adding what language the document in goes like a long, long way. So there are very simple things that you can do to improve the site for someone who isn't like from an English speaking country. And it doesn't have to necessarily be it doesn't have to be that big. There are little things to big things that you can do.
Why is the company that you're working at now doing its things localized more than where you'd worked previously?
Well, because it's more about the target. So the company I worked with previously, that I said was a media company in Nigeria, the content was all English, so we didn't necessarily need to think about people viewing from different countries. And obviously, like if the company had gotten bigger, then that would be more of a pressing issue. But for the company I work for now, which their main product is AdBlock Plus, and it's used by like millions of users. So it's not only English speaking users that are users of our product. So we have to think much more globally.
Ah, okay. How important, we've talked about, performance, we talked about accessibility, we talked about internationalization, but how important is another kind of diversity that we haven't talked about, which is device diversity? I have an iPhone. Do you have an iPhone?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't we just design only for iPhones?
Well, I mean, that would be easier if everyone used the same, if everyone used the same device. But I mean, that's just not the reality. And we're not building iOS applications, we're building websites. And if we're going to build something for the web, then we have to build it to work across different devices. That's just kind of like the fact of the web. It's always been open and hopefully it always will be. And if you're going to build a website, I think it's just the responsibility to build it to work across various devices. Because like I said, if you didn't want to do that, then that's where you can just build like a native application.
Yeah, my brother just upgraded from a flip phone with internet to a low end. I think it's $19 Android. I don't even know the brand, but it's like just the cheapest Android he could get, because when he wants to watch YouTube, he goes to the local cafe and uses their internet, or he goes to McDonald's and uses their internet, because he doesn't want to take his 3 gigabytes of data and use it. So he doesn't watch videos even on his phone. So I wonder if he could even look at my podcast site. I have to check to see if I've designed for his device, his lower end device.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it isn't actually that much work to make a site work on lower end devices, because that's kind of how things work out of the box. It's more things that we do that change those things. So if you were building just like a plain static website, then you won't really need to worry about all of these things. But because obviously we're trying to build more and more complex things, we're using like JavaScript frameworks and all these new technologies. And that's kind of why we need to kind of walk back and think, oh, how can we actually get back to where we started, which was just a simple document.
Ah, that's interesting. One thing that I actually found that you might be interested in about my podcast, I changed it recently to a relatively static site. But when you click on episodes and look at the archives, in fact, you get 600 episodes, because there's been a lot of episodes, and those episodes have a face for all 600. Even though you don't look at all 600 faces when you hit the page, I was loading every single one of them.
Oh,
so that page weight was 10 megabytes.
Whoa, that is a lot.
Yeah. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but then I ended up hooking up a tool called Application Insights. And, there's all different kinds of tools that will do this. And it basically tests your website all over the earth. And it said that people in Bangladesh, it takes almost 30 seconds to load this page. So I went and I did the research, and it turned out all I needed to do was put in some JavaScript that would load those faces when they enter the viewport. So when someone scrolls down, then I open it. Made a huge difference. But I never would have known unless I either asked someone with low bandwidth or had a tool tell me that it was a problem.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually just really simple. It's really easy to do those things that result in really large page sizes. And that's kind of why, I don't know, we have a lot of power with the web to do all these things, but we also have to try as much as possible to think about what we're doing and think about if we're doing things the right way, which is what is kind of difficult, right? Because we have to go and research and make sure we're not just like writing nonsense that could, I don't know, cause like everything to explode. So
Yeah.
yeah, but like you said, there are loads of really great tools out there that will help you along this road. Like you don't have to necessarily know everything yourself. So one thing I would mention that's really good is Lighthouse, which is now built into Chrome. I think if you just open your DevTools, you can just run a quick analysis of your page, and it will bring up any things that are major that are wrong with your site in terms of like performance, accessibility, all of that stuff. So you don't necessarily have to know all this stuff yourself, as long as you have a few tools that you can use to just know if you're on the right track, then that's good enough.
Oh, wow. So I had no idea. So I just went into my podcast. I hit F12 in Chrome and I clicked on audits, AUDIT, and there's a picture of a lighthouse. And now it says Lighthouse is looking to see what your website's like on a 3G connection. And it's doing a whole thing. It's like a 30-second long process.
Yeah, it's actually really amazing. It was initially built to kind of test progressive web apps in particular, because it also tests things like if there's a service worker there, it tests if your application or your website rather works when there's no connection at all. So it tests if you have like some kind of caching strategy. But it's also good, like I said, for the other things like just performance and making sure you're not doing anything that's really, really going to be detrimental. So I would definitely suggest for any site you have, just try it out. I mean, it's free, it's in Chrome, and you can just have a general idea of where your site is.
This is amazing. So I just finished, and it is telling me that my SEO is good and that my best practices are good. But then under performance, it says it took almost 3 seconds for the first meaningful paint. And it took 5 seconds before it was consistently interactive. So I have some blocking scripts that I didn't even know about.
Yeah, exactly. So there are many things that you might not even be aware of. That always, like whenever I do that, if something always comes up that I maybe would have tested before and I didn't test this time. So it will definitely bring up things that you might not have even thought of as well.
Yeah, this is great. It also points out progressive web apps, which I know that you're an expert in. That is a way of making my website feel more like a web app. And it's giving me all sorts of tips about, changing the address bar and having a splash screen and prompting the user to maybe even add the web app to their home screen. I had no idea this existed.
Yeah, it's really amazing, right? And because progressive web apps are getting so powerful, there's so many more things you could do. Like you mentioned, things like almost embodying or having a similar experience to what a mobile device or mobile application is going to be like. So things like having like a splash screen, and also what I mentioned about having some kind of offline first strategy. So those things it will also bring up and like suggest like, oh, these are things you can do. And it's actually surprisingly really easy to set up these things, like just having the splash screen. All you need is like a single file, which is called like a manifest file. And all you have to do is like link to some icons that you create and just say, oh, you want it to be full screen. So you want to hide the address bar when the user launches the app. And all of a sudden you have what looks like a completely native application.
Yeah, this looks like something that I could spend just maybe a few hours on or maybe a weekend, and I could take all of these scores up into the green, because right now it looks like 3 out of 5 are orange, which looks like an almost failing grade.
No, it's not failing until it's red.
Okay. Well, I am orange then. I'm almost failing. But this is a way for me to hit the next billion users. I want to make sure that when someone hits my site anywhere in the world on any device, they have a great experience.
Yeah, exactly. And what I also want to say is that it doesn't have to be like 100% perfect site that works for everybody in every single situation. Like, I don't know how many sites there are that actually hit 100 out of 100 on that Lighthouse score. But you don't necessarily have to get 100. You should just make little improvements every day. And that's what I also say about accessibility, because people tend to get demoralized, or I'm not sure what the word is, like when they hear that, oh, they want to make a site accessible for screen reader users, and then they think, oh, they have to do this, they have to do that. But one thing that I always say is that you don't have to make it perfect. You just have to make like a little improvement. And if someone who like is using a screen reader couldn't like read anything on your site yesterday, but then today you added some image alt text and all of a sudden a few things are more accessible to them. Like that is still a really worthwhile improvement to make. And it's the same thing for performance and internationalization. It's just the little things you do really do make a difference. So you shouldn't get discouraged from thinking you need to have like 100% score. You just need to kind of, I don't know, get one score up every day.
Very true. Very true. Well, you just given me a task that I'm going to spend the rest of my afternoon fixing, and I appreciate that.
Oh, great.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for chatting with me today.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Ire Aderinokun, you can find her online on Twitter and on her blog. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.